The mysterious visitor Jack sat alone inside the small metal room. His boots were dirty from the long patrol and his gun rested beside him. The world outside was dark and cold. He could hear the wind crying against the walls of the base. It had been 3 weeks since Jack had seen another human face. His outpost was far away from the main colony, built to watch the empty hills and strange purple skies. Nothing ever happened here. Some days he almost wished for something different to happen. Almost. Jack stood up and stretched. His body ached from sitting too long. He picked up a cup of old coffee, took a sip, and made a face. It was cold and bitter. Suddenly he heard it. A sound. Soft footsteps outside his door. Jack froze. His heart started beating faster. He grabbed his gun quickly and pointed it at the door. Who could it be? No one was supposed to come here. No one. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Jack stepped carefully toward the door. His finger was ready on the trigger. He counted to 3 in his mind, then pulled the door open fast. And there she stood. A woman, but not human. Her skin was a pale silver color. Her hair was long and white, like soft threads of light. Her eyes were large, shining with a soft blue glow. She wore a simple cloak, torn and dirty at the edges. She looked at Jack with a calm face as if she was not afraid at all. Jack didn't move. His mouth opened a little, but no words came out. The woman took 1 step forward past Jack and into the room. Jack turned, shocked. "Hey," he said, but she did not understand. She walked slowly to the small bench and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. She looked around the room like she belonged there. Jack closed the door quickly and locked it. His hands were shaking, a little. He stared at her. "Who are you?" he asked. "What do you want?" The woman said nothing. She only tilted her head a little and gave a soft smile. Jack lowered his gun slightly. Maybe she was not here to hurt him, but still he couldn't trust her. This planet was filled with alien creatures. Some were dangerous, some were worse. He moved closer and pointed at the door. "Go," he said firmly. The woman looked at the door, then back at Jack. She shook her head slowly, once. Jack frowned. He had no idea what to do. He had never been trained for this. Aliens were supposed to stay, in their own zones. And she definitely didn't belong in a human military base. Jack decided to try again. He pointed at her, then at the door. "You leave," he said, speaking slowly and clearly. Again, she stayed silent. She pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders and leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment like she was very tired. Jack sighed. He put the gun down on the table but kept it close. He had so many questions but no answers. Why was she here? Was she lost? Was it a trick? He sat down on the other side of the room, keeping his eyes on her. She didn't move. She just sat quietly, breathing softly. Minutes passed. Jack noticed something strange. She wasn't just sitting. She was listening. Every small sound outside, the wind, the distant thumps, made her ears twitch slightly. She was scared of something. Not him. Something outside. Jack felt a chill run down his back. Maybe she wasn't here to hurt him. Maybe she was hiding. But hiding from what? The woman opened her eyes again and looked at Jack. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her hand and pointed at herself, then at him, and then placed her hand over her heart. A simple gesture. Jack blinked. Was she trying to say she meant no harm? That she trusted him? He didn't know. He wanted to trust her. Something deep inside told him she was not his enemy, but he couldn't forget where he was. Alone. Far from help. Jack leaned forward slightly. "Okay," he said softly. "You can stay. For now." The woman gave the smallest nod, almost like a bow. Then she leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes again. Jack watched her. The night was long. Outside, the wind howled louder, and strange lights flickered far across the hills. Inside the small metal room, two enemies from different worlds sat together in silence. And somewhere far beyond the hills, something dangerous was coming for them both. Strange behaviors. Jack did not sleep that night. He sat in his chair, watching the alien woman like a hawk. Every time he blinked, fear whispered in his mind. Was she dangerous? Was this some kind of trap? He had seen soldiers fooled before, and they did not live to tell their stories. The woman stayed quiet. She slept lightly against the wall, her arms wrapped around herself. Every once in a while, she shifted or flinched, as if nightmares chased her even in her dreams. Jack noticed her face. In the soft light of the room, she didn't look like a monster. She looked tired, scared. Morning came slowly. A pale gray light leaked in through the cracks of the window. Jack rubbed his face and stood up, muscles stiff. He had survived the first night. Now he needed a plan. He approached the woman carefully, making sure to make noise so she would not feel attacked. She opened her eyes quickly, alert like a hunted animal. Her blue gaze met his, sharp and clear. Jack raised his hands to show peace. Food, he said simply. He pointed toward the small storage locker in the corner. She hesitated but finally nodded. Jack pulled out 2 dry ration packs, one for him, one for her. He tossed the second pack across the table. The woman caught it, easily, almost too easily. Jack noticed the speed of her reflexes. She was trained, like a soldier or a hunter. She opened the pack and studied the food inside. Slowly, awkwardly, she sniffed it, then took a tiny bite. She chewed carefully like someone who had not eaten in days. Jack sat down across from her. They ate in silence, broken only by the crackle of the plastic wrappers. When the meal was over, the woman stood up. Jack tensed. She walked to the broken communication panel on the wall. It had been dead for a week, the radio tower hit by a storm. Jack hadn't been able to fix it. No signals in or out. The woman ran her slender fingers across the wires and buttons. She hummed softly under her breath, a sound that didn't seem human. Then, to Jack's amazement, she took a small metal tool from inside her cloak, something that looked like a curved needle. Within seconds, she twisted 2 wires together, tapped a few buttons, and the panel sparked. The room filled. With static, Jack jumped to his feet. How the hell? The woman smiled faintly but said nothing. She simply turned and walked back to her seat. Jack stared at the panel, still buzzing with life. How had she done that? She wasn't just some helpless wanderer. She knew human tech. She understood it, maybe better than he did. Questions burned in Jack's mind, but before he could ask anything, a deep rumble shook the ground. He froze. So did the woman. Both of them looked toward the door. Another rumble, then another, like footsteps, heavy ones. Jack grabbed his rifle. The woman stood, pulling her cloak tighter. Her body was tense now, every muscle ready to run or fight. Jack moved to the window and peeked outside. Something was moving out there. Huge shapes, dark and slow, slipping through the mist. He couldn't see them clearly, but he felt the danger rising. His instinct screamed at him to hide. He turned to warn the woman, but she was already moving. She grabbed Jack's wrist firmly and pulled him away from the window. She pointed downward, toward the floor hatch that led to the storage basement. Jack understood immediately. He opened the hatch and climbed down. She followed without a sound, closing the hatch above them carefully. In the darkness, they crouched side by side, breathing lightly. Above them, the front door creaked open. Jack held his breath. He heard heavy boots stepping into the room. More than one pair, maybe 3 or 4. Strange voices spoke in low, guttural tones, not human language. Jack's heart pounded in his ears. One of the invaders knocked over a chair. Another opened lockers, throwing supplies on the floor. They were searching for something, or someone. Jack felt the woman's hand brush his. She placed her palm over his, squeezing lightly. It was a silent message. Stay calm, stay quiet. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, The voices moved away. The boots stomped back outside. The door slammed shut. Jack and the woman stayed hidden a little longer just to be sure. When Jack finally climbed out of the basement, rifle ready, the room was a mess. Food spilled everywhere, equipment broken. But the strangers were gone. Turned to the woman. "What the hell is going on?" he whispered harshly. The woman didn't speak. She walked to the broken window and looked out across the hills. Her face was serious, almost sad. Jack felt anger rising inside him. "You brought them here, didn't you?" he said. "They're after you." The woman looked back at him and nodded, slowly. Jack's stomach twisted. He didn't know who she was, he didn't know what she wanted, but now he knew one thing for sure. By letting her inside, he had made a very dangerous enemy, and there was no going back now. Silent threats. Jack did not trust her anymore. He sat with his back against the cold metal wall, rifle across his knees, eyes locked on the alien woman. She stayed near the broken window, watching the empty hills with a sad, faraway look. The morning was heavy with silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy in your bones, telling you something bad is close. Jack checked his weapon again. Only a few energy charges left. Not enough for a real fight. If those strangers returned, he would be dead within minutes. The woman turned to him and pointed toward the door. She made a simple gesture, fingers walking in the air, then a slicing motion across her neck. Jack understood. More would come, and they would not leave until they found her. Jack cursed under his breath. "Why me?" he muttered. "Why my outpost?" The woman gave him a soft look. Not pity, not sadness. Something like regret. She moved closer and sat down a few feet away. Carefully, she took a small device from inside her cloak. It looked like a flat, silver coin with glowing edges. Jack gripped his gun tighter. "What's that?" The woman pressed the device. A soft blue light floated up, forming a three-dimensional image in the air. Jack leaned forward, frowning. The image showed two groups. One looked human, the other alien. They stood together, shaking hands. Peace. Then, in the image, another group of aliens attacked from the shadows, killing both sides. Betrayal. The woman pointed to herself, then to Jack, then back to the peaceful side of the image. She touched her heart. Jack stared at her. "You're trying to help humans?" he asked slowly. She nodded. Jack sat back, mind racing. If she was telling the truth, she was a traitor to her own people, risking everything to help humans and bring peace. But if that was true, it meant the strangers hunting her were not just soldiers. They were executioners. And if they found her, here, they would kill Jack too. No questions asked. Jack rubbed his face with both hands. He needed a plan. Fast. He stood up and grabbed a small backpack from the supply locker, threw in food, water, and extra ammo. The woman watched him carefully, but said nothing. "You can't stay here," Jack said, slinging the pack over his shoulder. "We need to move." He opened the door slowly and peered outside. The hills were quiet, mist swirling in lazy curls. No movement, no sound. Yet Jack felt eyes watching from somewhere. He stepped out, rifle ready. The woman followed close behind, moving silently like a ghost. They stayed low, weaving between rocky outcrops and patches of dead trees. Every crunch of gravel under Jack's boots sounded too loud in his ears. Minutes stretched into hours. Twice, Jack saw dark shapes far away. Maybe scouts, maybe worse. Each time they hid behind stones, not daring to breathe. As they crawled through a dry riverbed, Jack whispered, "Where are we going?" The woman made a signal with her hands. A mountain, then a cave. Shelter. Jack nodded. It was better than staying, out in the open like targets. They moved faster now. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of blood red and deep gold. Shadows grew longer, stretching across the land like dark fingers. Jack's legs burned from running, but he forced himself to keep going. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Jack spun around, just in time to see a dark figure leap over the rocks behind them. Enemy. The woman grabbed Jack's arm and pulled him into cover. Two more figures appeared, weapons ready. Jack aimed and fired. Blue energy bolts cracked through the air. One enemy fell, but the others split up, moving fast. Jack ducked behind a boulder, heart hammering. The woman crouched beside him, her eyes sharp and focused. She pointed up the hill, a narrow path leading toward the mountains, their escape. Jack nodded. "Cover me," he hissed. The woman pulled something from her cloak, a small device that glowed bright green. She threw it toward the enemies. It exploded in a flash of light, blinding them. Jack didn't wait. He grabbed the woman's hand and they sprinted uphill, stones slipping under their feet. Shots whizzed past them. One bolt grazed Jack's arm, burning his skin. He gritted his teeth and kept running. The enemies shouted behind them, angry and closing in. Finally, they reached a crack in the mountainside, the entrance to a cave. Jack pushed the woman inside first, then followed, pressing himself against the cool stone. They waited, breathing hard, listening. Outside, the enemies searched the area, shouting in a language Jack couldn't understand, but they didn't find the hidden crack. After what felt like forever, the voices faded away. Jack slumped against the wall, exhausted. The woman knelt beside him and gently touched his burned arm. She pulled out a small tube of blue gel and spread it over the wound. The pain cooled instantly. Jack looked at her. "Thanks," he whispered. She smiled softly. For the first time, Jack realized something. They were not just running from enemies. They were fighting for something bigger than survival. They were fighting for trust, for hope, for a future where human and alien could stand together. Jack didn't know if they would survive the next day, but right now, in the cold dark of the cave, he wasn't alone anymore. And somehow, that made all the difference. Hidden. Secrets. The cave was cold and dark. Jack sat near a small fire they had built with broken sticks and dry moss. The flames threw strange shadows on the walls. The alien woman sat across from him, quiet as always, her silver hair glowing in the firelight. Outside, the night was deep and dangerous. Every sound seemed louder in the dark. Distant howls. The low rumble of something moving through the hills. Jack's nerves were sharp. His muscles stayed tense, ready to grab his rifle in an instant. He didn't trust the silence. He didn't trust the night. And he still wasn't sure if he trusted her. Jack watched the woman carefully. She was not like any alien he had seen before. She was calm, almost too calm. Even after being hunted, even after nearly being killed, it didn't make sense. Why was she so different? Why was she so important that killers were chasing her across half a planet? The woman finished eating a small piece of ration food, then reached into her cloak again. Jack tensed. His hand slid toward his rifle, but she didn't pull out a weapon. Instead, she pulled out something else. A small crystal. It was about the size of Jack's thumb, smooth and clear, but with a soft blue light pulsing at its heart, like a slow heartbeat. The woman held it out to him with both hands, a gesture of deep respect. Jack stared at it. He didn't move. "What is it?" he whispered. The woman pointed to the crystal, then to herself, then to Jack. Then she pressed her hand over her heart. Jack frowned. "A bond?" She nodded slowly. Jack leaned closer to the crystal. The light inside it seemed alive, shifting and swirling. The woman placed the crystal carefully on the ground between them. She picked up a small stick and began to draw in the dust. Simple pictures. A star, a planet. Two figures, one human, one alien, standing together, then a third figure, a dark shape, attacking them both. Jack watched, trying to understand. "You tried to make peace," he said slowly. "You tried to bring humans and aliens together." The woman nodded again, her face serious. But someone didn't want peace, Jack guessed. She nodded again, sadness filling her eyes. Jack felt a chill. This wasn't just about survival. This was about war. Someone powerful, someone cruel, wanted the war between humans and aliens to continue. Someone who would kill anyone who tried to stop it, including her. And now, because Jack had helped her, they would kill him too. Jack sat back, running a hand through his messy hair. His mind raced. "What do we do?" he asked, almost to himself. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she stood up and walked deeper into the cave. Jack grabbed his rifle and followed her. The cave twisted and turned like a snake. After a few minutes, the passage opened into a wider space. Strange markings covered the walls, glowing, symbols in a language Jack didn't understand. The woman touched one of the symbols with her fingertips. The wall shimmered. A hidden door slid open with a soft sigh. Jack's mouth fell open. Behind the door was another room, an ancient chamber. At the center stood a tall device covered in dust and vines. It looked like a machine, but older than anything Jack had ever seen. The woman stepped into the chamber and knelt before the machine. She pressed the crystal into a small opening at its base. The machine shuddered. Lights flickered to life, casting soft blue glows across the stone walls. Jack stood frozen. What is this?" he whispered. The woman looked at him, her face solemn. She pointed to the machine, then to Jack. Then she pointed to the sky. Jack's heart pounded. This machine was meant to send a signal to space, a call for help, a call for unity. Jack realized the truth slowly, painfully. She had come here not just to hide. She had come here to activate the machine, to send a message across the stars, to tell both humans and aliens the truth about the war, about the lies, about the ones who wanted endless bloodshed. Jack swallowed hard. If she succeeded, it could change everything. But it could also make them both the biggest targets in the galaxy. He stepped closer to the machine, looking at the ancient controls. Symbols blinked, waiting to be touched. The woman looked at him, waiting, trusting him. Jack took a deep breath. He reached out and touched the panel. The machine hummed louder. But before the message could be sent, a loud blast shook the cave. The entrance exploded inward, throwing dust and rocks into the air. Jack coughed, covering his face. Voices shouted in. The darkness. The killers had found them. The woman grabbed Jack's hand, pulling him back from the machine. She pointed to a narrow tunnel on the far side of the chamber, an escape route. Jack hesitated, looking back at the machine. The message was almost ready. So close. But he knew they couldn't fight a full squad alone. Not here. Not now. Survive first. Fight later. Jack nodded. They ran. Behind them, the machine's lights continued to blink, the signal building, ready to launch. But time was running out, and somewhere deep inside Jack, a cold fear grew. The woman had secrets still hidden, secrets that could save them, or destroy them both. The chase begins. The ground shook under Jack's boots as he ran through the narrow tunnel, the alien woman close behind him. Dust and broken stones rained down from the ceiling with every distant explosion. The cave was collapsing. Jack didn't dare look back. He could hear them, the hunters, shouting in their guttural language, their boots slamming against the stone. Getting closer. The tunnel curved sharply to the left, then sloped downward into deeper darkness. Jack switched on the small light attached to his rifle. A weak beam cut through the black. The woman tapped his shoulder and pointed forward urgently. Go, Jack breathed. He didn't need convincing. They sprinted down the tunnel. The path twisted, like a snake through the earth. Sometimes they had to crawl under fallen rocks, other times they slid down steep, dusty slopes. The air grew colder, thinner. Jack's chest burned with every breath. Behind them, the hunters came faster, louder. Jack knew they had only minutes before being caught. They rounded a final bend and stumbled out into open night air. The cave exit was hidden among thick black trees that looked almost dead, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. Strange blue fog drifted across the forest floor, swirling around their ankles. Jack didn't stop. "Keep moving," he hissed. The woman followed silently, her silver hair whipping behind her like a banner. They dashed into the forest, ducking under, low branches leaping over fallen logs. Every sound felt magnified, the crunch of leaves, the crack of twigs under their boots. Jack forced himself to focus. Run, hide, survive. That was all that mattered now. The trees grew denser, the fog thicker. Jack could barely see a few feet ahead. It was like running through a dream, or a nightmare. At one point, Jack stumbled over a root and crashed hard into the ground. Pain shot through his wrist. He scrambled up quickly. The woman reached out to steady him, her touch firm but gentle. Jack nodded his thanks, ignoring the pain. They pressed on. Suddenly, a blast of energy slammed into a tree just inches from Jack's head, sending bark and smoke into the air. They were spotted. Jack cursed under his breath and grabbed the woman's hand, pulling her into a side path off the main trail. They weaved through the forest, making random turns, trying to lose their pursuers. Another blast ripped past them. Another. Jack's heart hammered wildly. They couldn't outrun them forever. They needed a plan. Up ahead, the ground dropped sharply into a narrow canyon. A dry riverbed wound through it like a cracked scar. Jagged rocks and dead trees lined the edges. Jack skidded to a stop at the edge, panting hard. The woman caught up and stared down into the canyon. It was steep, dangerous, but it was their only choice. Jack met her eyes. No words were needed. They jumped, sliding, falling, tumbling down the slope. They crashed into the dry riverbed below. Jack rolled to his feet, coughing dust from his lungs. Above them, the hunters reached the canyon's edge, shouting, firing wildly. Bolts of blue energy rained down, blasting the rocks around them. Jack grabbed the woman's hand again and sprinted, down the riverbed using the canyon walls as cover. Every step was a gamble. Every breath was borrowed time. They followed the riverbed until it narrowed into a tight rocky path between two cliffs. Jack could hear water somewhere far below, deep underground. The woman pulled Jack toward a shadowy crack in the cliff face, another hidden path. Jack hesitated only a second, then they squeezed into the narrow passage. Darkness swallowed them. Inside, it was cold and damp. Strange glowing moss covered the walls, casting weak green light. The passage twisted deeper into the cliffs. Jack kept moving. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded slightly. Maybe they had lost them for now. But Jack knew it wouldn't last. The hunters were too skilled, too determined. They would not stop until Jack and the woman were dead. After what felt like hours, the passage opened into a small hidden valley, surrounded by high cliffs. Strange alien plants grew thickly here, glowing softly in blue and purple colors. Jack collapsed onto the soft grass, gasping for air. The woman knelt beside him, checking his injured wrist. She wrapped it tightly with a strip of cloth torn from her cloak. Jack winced but said nothing. "Thanks," he muttered. She gave him a small nod, her face unreadable. They rested for a moment. Just a moment. But Jack's mind refused to rest. He thought about the hunters, about the machine in the cave, about the signal they had almost sent, about the crystal still hidden safely in the woman's cloak. It held everything. Proof of the betrayal. Proof of the truth. And now, their enemies would do anything to destroy it. Jack sat up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We can't stay here," he said. The woman nodded in agreement. She pointed across the valley, to a steep path winding up one of the cliffs. Escape. Jack sighed heavily. His whole body ached, but he knew she was right. There was no safety anymore. Not for them. Only running. Only fighting. Only surviving. Jack got to his feet, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Let's go," he said. They started climbing the cliff. slow and careful. Halfway up, Jack looked back. In the misty valley below, dark shapes moved among the trees. The hunters had found them again. Jack clenched his jaw and climbed faster. Above them, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, cold and distant. Jack wondered if anyone back home even knew what was happening out here, if anyone cared. He looked at the woman climbing beside him, her silver hair catching the starlight. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe all that mattered now was staying alive. Because if they could survive long enough, they might just change the fate of two worlds. The last stand. The climb up the cliff was the hardest thing Jack had ever done. His fingers slipped on the sharp rocks. His boots scraped against the stone. His injured wrist throbbed with every pull. But he didn't stop. The alien woman climbed, ahead of him, moving fast and sure, her silver hair whipping in the cold wind. Behind them, the hunters were getting closer. Jack could hear their heavy boots on the rocks below, their strange growling voices, their weapons charging. There was no more time, no more chances. At the top of the cliff, Jack hauled himself over the edge and collapsed onto the hard ground. His lungs burned. His legs felt like broken wood. But he was alive. For now. The woman reached down and helped him up quickly. No words were spoken. None were needed. They stood at the edge of a rocky plateau. From here, Jack could see the world, spread out below, endless hills, broken forests, rivers that glowed faintly in the dark. It should have been beautiful, but all Jack felt was dread. The woman pointed across the plateau, a small structure half buried in stone, an ancient communication tower, ruined, but maybe still alive. Jack understood instantly. If they could reach the tower, if they could connect the crystal, maybe they could finish the signal, send the truth, warn the humans, stop the war. Maybe, if they survived long enough. Jack nodded. Grimly they ran. The rocky ground was uneven, broken in places. Jack stumbled more than once. His body screamed for him to stop, to rest. But he forced himself forward. The tower grew closer, closer. Then, a sound like thunder rolled across the plateau. Jack turned his head, and his heart nearly stopped. The two hunters had reached the top of the cliff. Dozens of them, more than he had ever seen before. They spread out like a dark tide across the plateau, weapons raised, faces hidden by metal masks, and leading them was a figure larger than the rest. A commander. Jack could feel the hatred burning from him even across the distance. The woman grabbed Jack's arm and pulled him forward. No time. No more. Running. The first shots rang out, bright blue bolts slicing through the air. Jack ducked behind a fallen stone, firing back blindly. The woman moved beside him, fast and fearless, dodging energy bolts, throwing small flashes of light that exploded in bursts, slowing the hunters down. They pushed forward, step by step, fighting their way toward the tower. Jack's rifle buzzed and clicked, out of power. He threw it aside and grabbed the small sidearm from his belt. Shots echoed across the plateau. Sparks flew, rocks shattered. Jack felt a bolt graze his side, burning hot, but he kept moving. The woman was hit, too, a deep cut across her leg. Blood, dark and strange, spilled down her shin. But she didn't stop. Neither did Jack. They reached the base of the tower, panting, bleeding, almost broken. The old machine stood like a sleeping giant, covered in vines and rust. Jack looked at the woman. She pulled the crystal from her cloak, the same small blue crystal that had started all of this. Her hands trembled as she placed it into the ancient control panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft hum. Lights flickered to life inside the tower. The ground beneath them vibrated with power. The signal was building. Jack turned to cover her. The hunters were coming fast, unstoppable. Jack fired his pistol until it clicked empty. The woman used her small devices, but they were running out too. The hunters closed in, 20 meters away. Then 10. Jack saw the commander raising a massive weapon, aiming straight at them. Too close, too late. The woman suddenly stood tall, her eyes blazing with a fierce light. She grabbed Jack's hand and shoved something into it, a second crystal, glowing bright white. Before Jack could ask, she turned and ran straight into the enemy fire. Jack shouted, but his voice was lost in the roar. The woman moved like a blur, dodging blasts, weaving through the hunters. She drew their fire away from the tower, away from Jack, away from the signal. Jack's heart shattered as he watched her fall. Shot once, twice, 3 times. But even as she fell to her knees, she raised her hand high, and in her palm a brilliant flash of light exploded, blinding the hunters. Jack knew what he had to do. With shaking hands, he slammed the second crystal into the tower's main console. The tower shuddered. A beam of pure energy shot into the sky, piercing the clouds, lighting up the whole world like a second sun. The hunters screamed, covering their faces. The ground cracked and shook. The old tower groaned and began to collapse. Jack ran to the woman's side, grabbing her broken body and pulling her toward cover. The plateau behind them fell away into the cliffs, rocks sliding, and crashing into the darkness below. Jack shielded her with his own body as debris rained down around them. The light from the tower grew brighter, louder until it filled everything, and then silence. When Jack opened his eyes again, he was lying on the ground covered in dust. The tower was gone. The hunters were gone. Only the stars watched from above, cold and distant. Jack turned to the woman. She was still breathing. Barely. Her eyes fluttered open and found his. Jack gripped her hand tightly. "You did it," he whispered, his voice broken. "We did it." The woman gave him a small, tired smile, and then she closed her eyes. Jack sat there for a long time, holding her hand, feeling the cold wind on his face. Above them, in the sky, new lights flickered, ships, human ships, coming fast. They had heard the signal. Help was coming. Maybe it wasn't the end after all. Maybe it was a beginning. Jack closed his eyes and whispered a silent promise. He would tell her story. He would tell the truth. And he would never forget the woman who refused to leave. The woman who changed everything. A new beginning. Jack woke to the sound of engines rumbling overhead. His body was stiff, every bone aching, but he forced his eyes open. The sky above was painted with gold and deep blue, the first light of dawn breaking across the broken plateau, and above it all, ships, human ships. They hovered like silent giants, shining beams of light across the shattered ground, scanning for survivors. Jack sat up slowly, wincing at the sharp pain in his side. His uniform was torn, dirty, and burned, but he was alive, barely. He turned quickly toward the woman lying beside him. Her silver hair was tangled and dusty, her skin pale against the dark rocks. Her chest rose and fell weakly, but she was still breathing. Jack felt relief flood through him. They had made it. Somehow, against every impossible chance, they had made it. He squeezed her hand gently. "Hold on," he whispered. "Help is here." Moments later, a group of human soldiers dropped down from one of the ships, landing heavily on the ground. They wore dark armor, and their faces were covered by helmets. At first, Jack's heart froze. Were they friend or foe? He struggled to his feet, raising one hand. "I'm Lieutenant Jack Mercer," he shouted hoarsely. "Sector Epsilon 3, requesting immediate medical aid." The soldiers paused. Then one of them stepped forward, pulling off his helmet, to reveal a tired but human face. "Lieutenant Mercer," the man said. "We received your signal. You're safe now." Jack almost collapsed from relief. 2 medics rushed forward and began checking his injuries. Another team moved toward the woman. Jack grabbed one medic's sleeve. "Be careful with her," he said sharply. "She's important." The medic nodded and knelt beside her, working quickly. As Jack watched, a heavy hand clapped his shoulder. "You did good, soldier," the officer said. "We picked up your signal all the way from command." Scared the hell out of them. Thought it was an enemy weapon at first. Jack gave a tired laugh. It sounded more like a cough. The officer's face grew serious. "Who's the woman?" he asked quietly. Jack hesitated. How could he explain? How could he put into words everything they had been through? The chase, the fear, the trust built in silence, the dream of peace? Jack looked at the woman, still unconscious but alive. He looked back at the officer. "She's a friend," Jack said simply. "She saved my life. She saved all of us." The officer studied him for a long moment, then he nodded. "All right," he said. "We'll take her with us." Jack felt a weight lift from his heart. The medics loaded them carefully onto a small shuttle. Jack sat beside her the entire time, never letting go of her hand. As the shuttle lifted off, Jack watched the ruins of the plateau fade into the distance. The tower was gone, the hunters were gone, but the signal and the truth had been sent. The world had changed, whether humanity was ready for it or not. Days passed in a blur. Jack woke in a clean, bright room aboard a human battleship. His wounds were bandaged, his body was healing, but his mind stayed heavy with memories. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, tired, brave, unbroken. He asked about her every chance he got. The medics said she was recovering, slowly but surely. One evening, Jack sat alone by a window, staring out at the endless stars. He heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned. She stood there, alive, awake. Her silver hair was brushed neatly now, her skin stronger, her eyes brighter. Jack rose to his feet, unsure what to say. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then she stepped forward and placed her hand over her heart, the same gesture she had made the first night they met. Jack smiled, heart swelling. He copied the gesture. Her smile widened, a small, shy thing but real. They didn't need words. Not anymore. The officer who had rescued them entered the room, clearing his throat. "We have a problem," he said, looking at Jack. Jack straightened. "The signal you sent," the officer said. "It wasn't just picked up by our command. Other alien factions heard it too. Some are angry. Some are scared." Jack nodded grimly. He had expected this. Change always comes with danger. "The council wants to meet you," the officer said. "They want to hear the full story from both of you." Jack glanced at the woman. She gave a small nod of agreement. Together, they would tell the truth. They would tell the world what they saw. The lies, the betrayal, the real enemy hiding in the shadows. Maybe they would be believed, maybe not. But they had to try, because peace was possible, and it was worth fighting for. Weeks later, Jack stood before the Human-Alien Council, a room filled with leaders from both worlds. The woman stood beside him, dressed in simple white robes, a symbol of hope. Jack told their story, the lonely outpost, the silent visitor, the endless chase, the ancient machine, the signal that had changed everything. He spoke simply, truthfully. When he finished, the room was silent. The leaders whispered among themselves, their faces a mix of fear, anger, wonder. Finally, one of the human generals stood. "Lieutenant Mercer," he said, "you risked everything to protect her. Why?" Jack looked at the woman. Then he looked back at the council. "Because she never left me," he said simply. "Not when she could have run. Not when it was dangerous, not even when it would have been easier to give up." He paused. "And because she believed we could be better." Together, the council fell silent again. The woman stepped forward. She raised her hand, palm open, a gesture of peace. Slowly, one by one, the leaders returned the gesture. Hope flickered in the room like a small, stubborn flame. It was not victory. Not yet, but it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning was enough. Jack smiled. He had kept his promise. He had told her story, and now the future was theirs to build, together.